I'm going to turn it over to open up tonight's business forum to Councilmember Vanessa Perez here from District 7. Councilmember Vanessa.
Thank you, everybody. So I just want to thank everybody for making the time to be here today. We are recording from the city of Laredo, so this will be available to share afterwards for those who couldn't be here in person. I'd just like to run down our dignitary list. We have Councilmember Alyssa Cigarroa here with us today. We have our Commissioner Cindy Liendo from the county. We have UISD Trustee Frank Castillo with us. We have former UISD Superintendent Bobby Santos with us. We have our Fire Chief Guillermo Hurd from the City of Laredo. And we have our Health Department Director, Dr. Richard Chamberlain, with us as well. I hope I didn't miss anyone, but everybody here, thank you so much. We have a lot of members of the business community that are here, and we know that this is an important day. Ethylene oxide is a chemical that is something that there really are no safe levels of. It's something that we are exposed to in our community, and there's certain parts in town that are more affected than others, but it pretty much affects the entire city of Laredo when you take into account the wind and the radius of how far this chemical can spread. It's odorless, it's colorless, so despite what you might hear from others, you're not going to see it, you're not going to smell it, you're not going to know it's there, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. And this is something that causes a serious health concern for not only adults, but actually for children, and it's 60 times more dangerous for children than anybody had previously expected. So on behalf of our children, protecting our future, protecting our community, it's in all of our best interest to figure out, find solutions to this problem and see what we can do about fixing it. And that's what we're here today to talk about. What are the risks? What is the situation, and how can we fix it? And so I will turn that over to Tricia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vanessa Perez. And next on the agenda, we have Ricardo Sandoval. He's an owner of Alterri Distribution Center, which is located very close to the Midwest Sterilization Plant. And he's going to give his perspective as a business owner and why he felt it was important to become a part of this business forum and also to work with our new Clean Air Laredo Coalition. Ricardo Sandoval.
Buenas tardes a todos, gracias por estar aquí. Es martes a las 6:30, entonces sí, un poco difícil, pero aquí estamos. Yo les quería platicar un poquito de lo que yo he llegado a entender y aprender y en las cosas que puede llegar a afectar a los negocios de nosotros, especialmente los que estamos en esta área, en parques industriales, que están a la de las minas y entre la 35. Ethylene oxide, o ETO, como le voy a referir durante el discurso, es, como lo mencionan, es un químico muy canceroso, puede llegar a causar varias enfermedades hacia la gente, especialmente los niños, pero más que nada es un carcinógeno muy peligroso porque no se puede ver, no se puede oler ni nada, y más que nada tenemos más de 15 años respirándolo sin haber sabido de eso. Eso es algo que nadie nos advirtió, nadie nos dijo, no hubo un aviso previo o algo de lo que se iba a estar contaminando el aire ni con qué. Entonces yo estoy aquí con ustedes, me paro al lado de ustedes para platicar de por qué estoy aquí, ¿verdad? Yo siempre he sido muy agradecido de Laredo. Es un pueblo, una ciudad más bien ya, ¿verdad? Pero es una ciudad donde si trabajas duro, si con el apoyo de tu familia, puedes lograr hacer un patrimonio para ti y para toda tu familia. Es una de las pocas ciudades que queda que todavía puedes lograr tener el sueño americano de empezar sin nada y acabar con mucho, ¿verdad? Y dejarle algo lo que viene siendo a nuestros hijos. Por eso a mí me gusta mucho Laredo y he aprendido muchas cosas. Pero Laredo también está llena de pura gente trabajadora, que es lo más padre, ¿verdad? Tiene los buenos y los malos. Por ser muy trabajadores, siempre están en lo mismo el día a día, en las operaciones, si estabas en el rubro de negocio en el que estamos, de logística, importación, exportación, pues ahí estás mortificado que con los clientes, que con esto, y realmente no levantas la cabeza a ver qué está pasando en la ciudad, qué es lo que realmente está afectando nuestros negocios con riesgos externos, ¿verdad? Y ahí es donde nosotros recientemente, a través de Trisha y todo el grupo de Laredo Clean Air Coalition, ¿verdad? Fuimos aprendiendo de esto, y ProPublica publicó un artículo, igual que Texas Monthly, en noviembre 8, que es ese mapa de ahí. Y si se fijan, la mayoría de donde trabajamos todos nosotros, los parques industriales, son las zonas más afectadas. Ahí lo que muestran son los números de qué tanta gente puede ser afectada por este tipo de carcinógeno que está en el aire. Lo más rojo viene siendo de cada 1 millón de personas, 200 pueden llegar a tener cáncer. Es algo muy peligroso, especialmente en el ambiente que trabajamos ya por sí. Trabajamos en un ambiente donde trabajamos con bodegas, con polvos, con tractores, con montacargas, gas propán. Ya estamos expuestos mucho. Y yo siempre he sido de la meta de poder y de creer en negocios, de ayudar a la gente a crecer. Como siempre se ha dicho aquí en Laredo, hay negocio para todos, champo para todos. Pero algo que sí no debemos de permitir es que por avaricia de una empresa en ahorrarse dinero y poder producir lo que en el proceso que están manejando ellos, empieza a afectar la salud de todos nosotros que estamos aquí. Especialmente una empresa que no es ni de Laredo, es de fuera. Ellos vinieron, pusieron su sucursal aquí o su planta aquí y empezaron a trabajar sin dar un previo aviso a los químicos que iban a estar exponiéndonos a todos. Y químicos, estamos expuestos por más de 15 años, como les menciono. Entonces, lo que yo quiero platicar con ustedes no nomás son lo que estamos expuestos y la salud, que es lo primordial, ¿verdad? Porque no se puede negociar la salud, pero más que nada, lo que nos afecta también o nos puede llegar a afectar. Ahorita la gente se va a enterar más de esto, en nuestro trabajo poder avisar a la gente en lo que estamos haciendo y hacer algo al respecto. Pero nuestros empleados ya no le podemos comprometer con la seguridad del medio ambiente que manejamos ahorita. De por sí ya tenemos varias cosas que están pasando, ¿verdad? Pero fuera de eso no podemos garantizar esa seguridad. Fuera de eso lo que podemos hacer es ofrecerles, como quien dice, healthcare o mejores sueldos, va a llegar a su punto. Y si dejamos que permitan esto, seguir creciendo la contaminación, no sé, 5 años, como ahorita va a mencionar la señora Urszula, en Illinois, llega a afectar tanto que la mayoría de la gente expuesta alrededor de 1 milla tuvo cáncer en el estado de Illinois. Y estamos hablando de cientos. Eso también para nosotros nos devalúa la propiedad, nos devalúa quién va a querer trabajar en ese tipo de ambiente, quién va a tener cómo vamos a, como quien dice, a poder ser rentables en esa zona a nuestros clientes. Hay muchos de nosotros que manejamos comestibles, comidas, cómo lo vamos a ver a la cara a los clientes y decir, ¿sabes qué? Aquí te lo almaceno, pero pues tengo tanto químico que está pasando y fluye entre mi bodega y entre mi yarda y entre todo, mi operación. Hay ciertos factores que no nomás es la salud y que no nomás es por el beneficio de una empresa, sino esos factores nos afectan a todos. Y eso es algo que nosotros no debemos de permitir. Una empresa que tiene 50 empleados no debe estar afectando los intereses de toda una población. Eso no debe ser permitido, especialmente siendo una empresa que es de fuera. Si ellos quisieran venir aquí, está bien, haz tu negocio, si quieres seguir con esos químicos a 40 millas de Laredo, no hay problema. Pero aquí en Laredo, con nuestra ciudad, con nuestra gente, con nuestro futuro, no se deben de meter. Yo por eso les pido, y estoy aquí para exigirle a Midwest que le pongan monitores de calidad de aire, para ver qué tanto realmente están exponiendo o qué tanto están soltando al medio ambiente. Y no de que ellos como dicen ahorita, que publicaron un artículo hoy, que ellos lo midieron y que dijeron que tenían 0 y que no había. Pues sí, o sea, digo, también. Todos sabemos hacer presentaciones. Entonces, que sea algo que, pues, ha sido juzgado, verificado por un tercero, y de ahí podamos realmente ver si están exponiéndonos a un químico, pues hacer algo al respecto. Y si no lo están, pues qué bueno que estén haciendo buenas prácticas. Digo, existe certificaciones como buenas prácticas en maquilas, en operaciones, en todo tipo de negocio. Esperemos que ellos estén usando ese tipo de buenas prácticas y que hagan mejoras. No nomás, y hay muchas maneras de esterilizar productos que no son de ese químico. Solamente que ese químico es la manera más barata que hay. Entonces, por el profit line de ellos, nosotros somos los afectados. Eso es algo de lo que yo quería platicar con ustedes y como les mencioné, muchas gracias por estar aquí a todos.
Muchas gracias, Ricardo. Thank you. And now to give an overview of the situation in Laredo, we have Sheila Serna. She's the Climate Science and Policy Director for the Rio Grande International Studies Center. And she comes, her background is with the TCEQ. She served 5 years doing air quality investigations and monitoring. And so Sheila will give the overview again of our Laredo situation.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Is that better? Buenas tardes a todos, muchas gracias por estar aquí con nosotros, se lo agradecemos. Como dijo Ricardo, ya sabemos que es martes a las 6:30 con mucho tráfico, ya sé que quieren llegar a su casa, pero les queremos platicar un poquito del problema que tenemos aquí en Laredo y les voy a explicar con una presentación que tienen. Okay. Aquí les voy a hablar del riesgo elevado que tenemos en Laredo, causado por las emisiones del óxido de etileno que son emitidos por Midwest. Ok, vamos a empezar con qué es el óxido de etileno, ¿verdad? Es un químico de clase 1. ¿Y qué quiere decir eso? Quiere decir que causa cáncer a los humanos. También es un gas que no tiene olor y no tiene color, entonces no lo vamos a ver, no lo vamos a sentir, o no lo vamos a oler y no lo vamos a ver. Es altamente inflamable. ¿Qué quiere decir? Que si prenden un cerillo, puede explotar. Es una molécula inestable y extremadamente pequeña que puede penetrar madera, plástico, cajas de cartón, que por esa razón es la que Midwest la usa para esterilizar el equipo médico, porque ponen sus tarimas de madera con plástico, no lo tienen que desenvolver, no lo tienen que sacar o tocar, solamente lo ponen en la cámara de gas y le echan el óxido de etileno. También es un químico derivado del petróleo y aquí en Laredo tenemos este problema porque, como ya dijimos, Midwest lo usa para esterilizar, pero en otras partes del país lo producen y lo usan para hacer detergentes, para hacer plásticos y también para anticongelante. Ok, también es un mutagénico, que quiere decir que puede cambiar el ADN. En los adultos se toma más tiempo en hacer ese cambio y obviamente en los pequeños, ¿verdad? Los niños, no se tarda tanto. La Agencia de Protección Ambiental de Estados Unidos, o EPA, como lo voy a referir, reconoció que los niños son más vulnerables a los efectos de esta sustancia. Y de todas las toxinas que regula el EPA, el óxido de etileno es uno de los que causan más riesgo para tener cáncer. Ok, los ciudadanos de Laredo obviamente están más a riesgo. Como vemos en este mapa, el área de Midwest es la estrellita amarilla. Todo alrededor, como dijo Ricardo, es el riesgo que tienen ustedes como personas que trabajan en el Killam Industrial Park o el parque de enseguida. No nada más Killam Industrial Park. Queremos que ustedes sepan, ¿verdad? Que nosotros no estamos contra el Killam ni nada de eso, ¿verdad? Solo queremos avisarles lo que está pasando con su vecino. Ok, y la ciencia sobre el óxido de etileno ha ido evolucionando, ¿verdad? Hace 5 años, en el 2016, el EPA sacó su evaluación de riesgo, ¿verdad? Antes del 2016, EPA, la verdad, no tenía, bueno, tenía una idea de lo malo que es este químico, pero en el 2016 lo hicieron firme con sus estudios y su evaluación para decir que es un tóxico que pues es cancerígeno. Y aquí les tengo una muestra de la tabla de emisiones del Midwest. También les queremos decir, esta información no viene de nosotros. Esta información es autoinformado por Midwest al EPA. Quiere decir que ellos son requeridos por el EPA de decir cuántas emisiones han tenido en un año. Entonces aquí vemos en el 2005 empezaron con su empresa. Ese año el total de emisiones fue 4.512. Si ven, va incrementando cada año. El año que tuvieron las emisiones más grandes fue en el 2019, que son 16.390 libras de óxido de etileno. Ok, ¿y qué quiere decir eso, verdad? Porque decimos, bueno, son 16.000 libras y no se escucha tan malo o no sé qué quiere decir eso. Aquí les tenemos otra tabla y esta información igual es del 2019. Midwest fue la planta que emitió 16.000 libras, haciéndolo el segundo mayor emisor de todos los Estados Unidos. O sea, aquí ven Huntsman en Port Neches es el primero, Midwest Sterilization en Laredo es el segundo. Y tienen también Midwest Sterilization en Jackson, Missouri, que es donde tienen su planta principal. Y al último tenemos a Sterigenics en Willowbrooks, Illinois, que casi llegan a 5.000, ¿verdad? Pero igual, Midwest en Jackson tiene mucho menos emisiones que aquí en Laredo. Casi 5.000, comparado a 16.000 que tenemos aquí en Laredo. Y, ok, sí, está bien. Igual, ok, aquí les voy a explicar un poquito por qué nos importa, ¿verdad?, que estamos expuestos al óxido de etileno. La exposición a corto plazo causa irritación de la garganta, de los ojos, de la piel, que a veces pueden decir es alergia, ¿verdad? O son los polvos del aire. Pero si tienen estos efectos y están directamente, o si son vecinos de Midwest, pues empiezas a pensar, ¿realmente son alergias o puede ser algo más? Daña el cerebro y el sistema nervioso, y los daños a largo plazo es que pueden, como ya dijimos, causar cáncer como el linfoma non-Hodgkins y leucemia y cáncer de mama. Bueno, ya a fines del 1990, EPA estableció el nivel aceptable de riesgo. ¿Qué quiere decir? Que el nivel aceptable de EPA es que una persona en 1.000.000 le dé cáncer con la exposición del óxido de etileno. En Laredo, el riesgo es de 1 en 30.000. Pero ustedes que trabajan por Mines Road o en Killam o en un parque industrial alrededor, el riesgo es mayor. El riesgo es de 1 en 560. O sea, EPA dice, lo normal es 1 en 1.000.000, pero ustedes están en el rango de 1 en 560. Y igual, ¿de dónde estamos sacando esta información, verdad? Porque todo lo que decimos viene de EPA o viene de Midwest. Aquí tenemos un mapa que salió en el artículo de ProPublica, en donde dicen lo que les acabo de decir, ¿verdad? En Laredo el riesgo es de 1 en 30,000, pero lo rojo, que es donde está Midwest, alrededor, los vecinos están al riesgo 1 en 560. Y pues aquí tenemos el mapa otra vez. Ok, bueno, y ahora nos toca hablar de soluciones. ¿Qué es lo que vamos a hacer al respecto? Y qué es lo que ustedes pueden hacer al respecto también. Pues les estamos pidiendo y hemos tratado de tener esa conversación con Midwest, ¿verdad? De que queremos sentarnos con ellos, queremos platicar, pero pues no tienen interés en nosotros. Pero ustedes como vecinos pueden ustedes pedirles, ¿verdad? Si ustedes dicen que están operando y todo está bien, ¿por qué no nos dan los datos, verdad? ¿Por qué no nos dan una explicación? Lo que nosotros queremos es que instalen monitores de aire y que den estos datos, que sean transparentes, que se los den a ustedes o la comunidad. Si no se los quiere dar a la comunidad, que se los den a ustedes. Y también les queremos pedir que cambien su modelo de negocios. Porque ahorita el EPA está trabajando en cambiar las reglas sobre el óxido de etileno. O sea, lo que les estamos pidiendo ahorita no va a tardar pedírselo el EPA. Y como dijo Ricardo, nada más porque son de fuera no quiere decir que pueden venir a Laredo y contaminar nuestro aire. Así que queremos que tomen en cuenta las preocupaciones de los ciudadanos y también de los vecinos, que son ustedes. Y obviamente también queremos trabajar con la ciudad de Laredo para comenzar un estudio de que son marcadores biológicos que con un simple examen de sangre sí, pueden detectar los niveles de óxido de etileno. Y pues obviamente los que son de interés son ustedes, que están más al riesgo. También traje aquí lo que sacaron en el periódico hoy, que es una investigación que hizo TCEQ. Y como yo como era investigadora de TCEQ antes, les puedo explicar un poquito de la investigación y por qué no es válida. Ok, aquí dicen que hicieron un monitoreo de aire con un equipo que se llama Multi-Rate Pro, pero este detector de aire no es sensible, no tiene la capacidad de medir un moléculo, un químico tan pequeño como el óxido de etileno. Entonces aquí dicen, no, pues no tuvimos nada de contaminación, entonces todo está bien. También dicen, no olimos y no vimos ninguna emisiones. Pues obviamente ya sabemos que el óxido de etileno no tiene olor y no tiene color, entonces no se va a poder ver. Y lo último que hicieron es que usaron una cámara, es como una cámara infrared que detecta gases, y dijeron, no, tampoco vimos gases de óxido de etileno, pero alguien que usó esa cámara 5 años, yo sé la ciencia tras de esa cámara, y no tiene la capacidad de detectar ese gas. Entonces son cosas que dices, pero mira, aquí dice TCEQ que están bien, que no hay nada, pero a la persona que lo lee va a decir, qué bueno, ¿verdad? No hay nada, no hay nada por qué preocuparse. Pero en realidad no es así. Entonces, estamos muy agradecidos otra vez con ustedes de que pues están aquí a escucharnos y I think that's it. That's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Sheila. And next, we're actually going to bring up Dr. Richard Chamberlain. He's the Health Department Director because he wants to explain everything that the City of Laredo and his department especially has been doing to try to get air monitors, to try to get a blood marker study, and it's not been easy at all. And so he wants to share some of that with you. So Dr. Chamberlain.
Thank you, Ms. Tricia, and good evening to everyone. I did want to provide a status update onto the actions that the City of Laredo has been taking since we were first made aware of this last year. So all this information that I will be sharing with each and every one of you, these actions have been ongoing battles to get into doors, knock on doors, open doors. Sometimes, as I was just sharing, that we get pie in the face, but we still keep on going because we do mean business. And so I would like to share that we at the City of Laredo have been in communication with Texas Department of State Health Services requesting support to conduct a cancer assessment. We have inquired, are there more cancer cases occurring in a geographic area, census tract, of concern, and if these cancer rates are higher or lower than what we expect a baseline at expected based on cancer rates in Texas. So that is a start for us. So this request went back into December of last year and just materialized for us as of April 26th, where we did get a response from the state of Texas letting us know that, and I'll read it verbatim, this is to inform you that DSHS has received data from the Texas Cancer Registry for years 2006 to 2019, and we have initiated an evaluation of data performed at the request of the requested cancer assessments. After the initial review of data, the assessment will be performed on the following cancer types for census tracts 1711, 1712, and 1715, which is in this area and a control area down in South Laredo. So we wanted to make sure that we were going to have that to balance and provide that variable. And so the cancers that will be assessed will be breast cancer, stomach cancer, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, nodal and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, extranodal. Unfortunately, for acute lymphocytic leukemia, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, other lymphocytic leukemias, and other acute leukemias, they didn't have enough data according to the DSHS to be able to provide us that information, which is also associated, of course, with ETO exposure. So we're very happy after knocking on doors, getting through that finally this is on one aspect, a cancer assessment, which can provide us data right now to let us know the baseline of what we're at, because of course exposure, as we all know, doesn't occur today or tomorrow. It can start occurring in the future, so we want to know where we're at, but also be able to tell if there has been an increase within the last couple of years as well. So as soon as we do have that information, of course, we'll be sharing that with the community. I did also want to share with the community that based on conversations that started happening, of course, last year in November, we at Laredo Health reached out to the area of the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, which is known as ATSDR, as they championed the cause in Willowbrook, in Illinois, with the biomarker study. So after many communications and most recently, virtual meetings with ATSDR, we have been able to break through with them and their organization, and they've let us know that they do support a biomonitoring study. Yet, of course, they want more baseline data from the community, i.e. a monitoring system to be put up in our community for air quality monitoring. So the City of Laredo also knows that, and we have, let me get that pulled up. We submitted a grant application, and thank you so much to the Clean Air Laredo Coalition for providing us a letter of support and many others in the community to the EPA so that we are able to gain funds to be able to retain equipment here in the community that will be able to provide us, and I can share with you, the goal of this project is to assess air quality needs and concerns by integrating multiple next generation air monitors throughout the community, measuring multiple gas pollutants, but specifically looking at ETO in this situation, but then be able to provide this data routinely to the community as this information isn't readily available. We do have 2 TCEQ air monitoring stations, but they don't monitor for ETO in our community. So it's really important that we start to think beyond just the 6 volatile organic compounds that are normally associated with air contamination, and ETO will be one of them. And so, as mentioned, going back to ATSDR, their associate director, Dr. Ray, has put me in communication with the U.S. Public Health Service, Captain Peden Kowalski. So he's assigned to the city of Laredo now to be able to help guide us and develop the biomarker study, of course, contingent on us getting the air quality monitoring data in the immediate future. As I've expressed to DSHS, TCEQ, ATSDR, and trying to get my foot into the door with EPA. Of course, with the help of the community, more voices will allow us to get there quicker, to let EPA know that we do need the resources and the technical support, as we don't have that subject matter expertise in our community, but we're more than willing to learn and become that expert for the community. So I'll pause there, and if there is any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at Laredo Health, and know that we are working diligently, silently, but loud in the background.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chamberlain. And next she is joining us by Zoom from Willowbrook, Illinois. It's a suburb of Chicago. Her name is Urszula Tanouye. She's a scientist, and she is a member of an organization there that formed in 2018 called Stop Sterigenics. And so she wants to talk about the dangers of ethylene oxide and the story of that community and how they responded. Urszula, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. And si hay alguien que se requiere un aparato para traducción, por favor, de venir para obtener un audífono, por favor. Okay, go ahead, Urszula. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you to RGISC for hosting this forum, and to all of you for taking the time to attend. My name is Urszula Tanouye, and I'm a biologist with an undergraduate degree from the University of Chicago and a master's in bacteriology from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I also serve as a public school board member and volunteer in local community groups, but most importantly for tonight, I am a member of the grassroots community group Stop Sterigenics in Willowbrook, Illinois. Sorry. Our community successfully pressured an ethylene oxide polluter to leave our community. Sterigenics opened their first building here in 1984 and expanded in 1999. We found out about them and the pollution they emitted in 2018 and launched an all-hands-on-deck effort to find a resolution that would eliminate the air pollution problem they were causing. A little over a year later, in 2019, Sterigenics declared their intent to close their Willowbrook facilities, citing an unstable regulatory environment, that was us, and difficulty renewing their lease. Over that time, Stop Sterigenics became the experts we needed to be to understand how ETO is used, how we're exposed to it, and what parts of government are involved, and how living near this hidden pollution source impacted our community. Our new role now is to support communities like yours in Laredo, who are trying to resolve your own ethylene oxide polluter issues, and to advocate for responsible use and control of ETO now that we have better information about how harmful it is. First, I'll talk about ethylene oxide, how it's regulated, focusing on commercial sterilizers, and how ETO affected our community. Then I'll suggest some big and small actions you can take as neighboring business owners in holding Midwest accountable for the impacts their business is having on you as neighboring businesses and on the community where many of you and your employees live. As the very knowledgeable staff from RGISC talked about, ETO is a hazardous substance. It's very flammable and explosive. The military uses ETO as a fuel in a high-yield bomb known as the MOAB, the mother of all bombs. ETO is known to cause cancer in humans in very small amounts over time, and it's linked to a long list of other effects, including dizziness, nausea, memory loss, blurry vision, nerve damage, muscle weakness, and miscarriages. It can also irritate the skin and lungs. ETO is researched and regulated by several agencies. EPA regulates emissions using technology standards. State environmental agencies like TCEQ handle permitting, inspections, and enforcement. State governments can impose additional rules like geographic setbacks, testing and reporting requirements, and building requirements like negative air pressure. Local governments have zoning power and can add certain ordinances. FDA approves protocols and residual limits on treated products like foods, drugs, cosmetics, and medical products. OSHA, the agency you're probably most familiar with, regulates workplace exposures, and CDC helps research and evaluate risks through NIOSH and ATSDR. You might say that's great. There's so much oversight and there are enforceable limits. That must mean all the risk is taken by the sterilizer business and it's tightly controlled. Unfortunately, that's not the case for a few reasons. Although ETO has been commercially used since the 1940s, we're still learning about how toxic ETO is and what exposure levels carry risks we should worry about. EPA set ETO sterilizer emission standards in 1994, and the newest risk update was published in 2016. Right now, regulations are lagging behind safety reports. We're also learning more about how ETO exits the buildings where it's used and gets into the surrounding areas. Traditional air pollution enforcement focuses on protocols, calculations, and stack testing, that main exhaust point on the roof. Usually, fugitive emissions, which are basically leaks and unintended releases, are only calculated based on how much ETO was used and how efficient the pollution controls are expected to be. Sometimes computer modeling can estimate how much ETO is released into the surrounding community, but the inputs to the modeling are those same calculations used for stack emissions and fugitives. Air monitoring can be done in a few ways. Stack monitors usually handle the higher concentrations coming out of pollution controls on top of the building. Handheld monitors or mobile devices on trucks are usually low sensitivity. They'll tell you if there's a serious immediate problem, but they can't read the cancer-causing low levels. In 2018 and 2019, EPA sampled ETO using a canister method and shipped them to a specialty lab for measurement. Using that canister method around Willowbrook, Illinois, they found out that their computer models for air pollution were an average of 10 times lower than what the canisters were physically measuring in the air. In a normal sterilizer building with typical pollution controls, ETO isn't just coming out of the stack. It's also seeping out of the building anywhere air escapes. Some big places are open doors, loading docks, any leaking storage tanks outside. ETO also off-gases for long periods of time from treated products. Now we've come to the point where I want to talk about how the regulations of those three big agencies, EPA, FDA, and OSHA, come together at the loading dock, and how a big part of your exposure as neighboring businesses happens. OSHA limits workers to 1 part per million time-weighted average per work shift. 5 parts per million is the maximum for any one 15-minute period in the day. Now, FDA allows products to be released at 7 parts per million on most foods and higher on other products like medical devices. EPA regulates emissions off the roof with a percentage reduction and technology standard. Meanwhile, we know from the recent risk report that a chronic exposure to 0.1 parts per trillion, so that's 1 leaded by a bunch of zeros, parts per million, and that correlates to 1 in a million extra cancer risk just from that exposure. 10 parts per million is the threshold that EPA holds. That's the 100 in a million for when they want to step in and take action. If Midwest is complying with all those agency rules at the same time and trying to turn over products as early as they can to get them to customers, their workers should be wearing protective PPE like respirators. But At the same time, they're opening their doors to your neighborhood and handing off those products at the FDA levels, not the OSHA levels, to the next person in the supply chain who doesn't have a respirator and usually doesn't even know they're being exposed to ETO, let alone to higher levels than OSHA would allow. Technically, Midwest would be following the rules, but with their fugitive emissions, they're exposing their neighboring businesses like you, their downstream people in the supply chain, and our communities to ETO that they're not really accounting for. ETO sterilizers like to talk about all the other ETO sources that contribute to the total ETO in our air. They claim there's lots of ETO coming from diesel engines and cooking gas, rotting bananas, and weeds. In Willowbrook, we had an opportunity to evaluate those claims. In 2018, when the updated air quality NADA map, this one, came out in Willowbrook, Willowbrook was one of the cancer hotspots. Even before NADA was publicly released, employees at an EPA warehouse down the street from Sterigenics were concerned and asked for air monitoring and a risk report. After all the reports became public, much more air monitoring was done by the village, private companies, and EPA, so we were able to see a lot of data. I'm going to show you a quick map of the area so you get a sense of where major roads and how much traffic, cooking, and organic matter we have in the area. This map shows the general area of Willowbrook. We're a small suburban town of about 8,600 residents that's surrounded by other small towns in a large metro area of about 9.6 million people. There's that commercial strip in the middle, and all the darker areas are residential, mostly built in the 1960s, before the sterilizer moved in. The green circles are the closest public K-12 schools. Sterigenics, a commercial sterilizer like Midwest, opened their buildings at those red marks in the middle in 1984 and 1999. Those big red lines are 1 mile. The immediate area of those Sterigenics buildings are the Willowbrook Town Hall and police station. A Target store is right next door to building 2. A restaurant is on the other corner. All up and down that industrial park are athletic spaces for swimming, soccer, general training. There are light industrial manufacturers, a cosmetics company, a commercial ice maker, car and semi dealers and mechanics, lots of office space and some storage, hotels, and more restaurants. It's a typical commercial and a retail strip. The east-west highway, that one is 6 lanes and leads to downtown Chicago about 23 miles away. The north-south highway, dividing the industrial park from the residential streets, is also 6 lanes near those clovers, and it merges to 4 lanes as it passes the industrial park. These are major throughways for trucks. The general area is deciduous forest and prairie. We have a fresh batch of rotting leaves and plants every autumn, and the residential areas are dense enough that pollution modeling programs classify the area as urban. To summarize, we have plenty of diesel traffic, cooking, and rotting plants in our area. There are tables full of air monitoring results, but this graph from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, which is a part of the CDC and wrote some of the risk reports for Willowbrook, summarizes an important big picture concept about ETO pollution around commercial sterilizers. On the left side of the graph, you see a bunch of colorful lines bouncing up and down. Some stay close to the bottom and others fill out the top. Each of those colors represents one air monitoring location throughout the mapped areas that we just looked at. Some monitors were across the street from the sterilizer and some were in the surrounding residential areas. The points on the graph are individual canister readings from air slowly collected over a 24-hour period using a slow intake valve. The height of the dots shows the ETO amounts in the sample, and the time the sample was taken is shown from left to right. So we had samples taken from November 2018 at the far left of that graph through March 2019 at the other side of the graph in the same location. Now you'll see that large vertical line that divides this graph into 2 clear sections. That's important. When regulators saw that the high ETO pollution readings were getting that high, especially in February, the state government shut down the sterilizer's operations with a seal order. Immediately after that seal order, no more ETO could be used at that plant. As you can see, the amounts of ETO measured in the later air monitoring samples on the right was much lower at all the sampling locations. The left side of the graph shows the contributions the sterilizer is making to total ETO in the air. And the right side of the graph shows everything else. Diesel engines, barbecue grills, cooking gas, rotting bananas, decomposing leaves, and whatever else these sterilizers try to scapegoat as the ETO sources. Okay, what about cancer risks? The EPA considers risks from 1 in a million to 100 in a million as an acceptable range. More than 100 in a million is cause for concern. For workers, risk was more than 100 for a few blocks around the plant. For residents, the cancer risk was more than 100 for about 1.4 miles from the facility. Risk dropped to 50 at about 2.7 miles. That's off this map. And it stayed above 1 in a million until about 25 miles away. This one facility put nearly the entire Chicago metro area of 9 million people at elevated cancer risk due to its ETO pollution, even under the best pollution controls it had in its entire operating history. So let's talk about how this impacted the community. Most of the businesses around Sterigenics were local, and the employees live in the surrounding areas. In our schools, it was common for teachers to have miscarriages and cancer. Families who lived nearby had frequent eye irritation and coughing. The closest neighbors had constant headaches and trouble concentrating. Their kids would stay home sick from school for headaches, stomach aches, and coughing. In the neighborhoods, there was cancer in almost every house of longtime residents. There were families with multiple people were cancer survivors in the house, and some with multiple cancers per person. We know cancer is common, but what we saw from talking to our neighbors was staggering. A custom cancer study in these neighborhoods confirmed that some cancers were happening more often than expected. When moms like me got together, we learned many of us use nebulizers and inhalers for respiratory issues in kids and adults. As moms, we often talked about rainbow babies. They're the children we have after 1 or more miscarriages. The effects listed on those tables earlier were more than words. We lived them every day. It was a constant burden that affected sick time and performance at work and school. Since the ETO pollution stopped, the worst affected families have said their quality of life dramatically improved. The headaches and coughs disappeared, concentration and cognitive function are much better, the kids rarely stay home sick now. We used to think the health effects were from highway traffic. Now we know ethylene oxide had the biggest impact on our day-to-day health. We can't undo the cancer risk we breathed for over 30 years, but we know that more cancer cases will continue to show up from our past exposure. Now, though, that we're not breathing in industrial levels of ETO pollution every day, we know our kids won't have the same risks that we do. If you're concerned about the health risks of having an ETO sterilizer nearby, and you're already seeing the costs like Ricardo described for extra insurance plans, we have some actions to suggest that you can do as businesses to let Midwest know that they're not being a good neighbor right now, and you need them to be better. First of all, please join the coalition so we can stand together and have strength in numbers. The coalition will also keep you informed of future actions you might be able to participate in, like letters you can sign on to that they talked about, questionnaires like the one from tonight, and events like this one. Midwest is spending a ton of advertising money right now to try to convince everyone that they're operating safely and scapegoating your businesses to blame you for ETO in the air, the diesel trucks and the rotting banana arguments. You now know better after attending this forum and seeing the data from a similar company in Illinois. Call them out on it. Tell them to stop blaming you for their air pollution. If Midwest wants to show their commitment to safety, tell them to spend some of that advertising money to put up some air monitors at their fence and show everyone the data. Those air monitors are our noses. We can't smell ETO, but good quality air monitors can. Let those decision makers know that the impact that Midwest is having on your business. If you have to offer extra insurance or extra pay to keep your employees, that's extra cost for you. If you've tried renting or selling your land and buyers keep asking about Midwest, think of it like a neighbor that doesn't keep a tidy yard or has strong smells coming from their yard all the time. Those concerns about your neighbor affect your property values. That's not fair to you if you're a responsible business owner and you keep your house in order. You all know that every business has rules and regulations that are part of running a business, and you have some choices in how to run your business. Midwest considers their costs, regulation burdens, and profits just like any other business. ETO isn't the only technology that can sterilize products that they need to do for their customers, and Midwest doesn't use all the control methods they could be using. There are several other technologies that would require some equipment upgrades, process changes, and they might not have a byproduct they can sell on the side like ETO does. But those other technologies can allow them to stay in the sterilization business without poisoning your community in the process. One last way you can help is by writing statements to regulators, describing how Midwest is affecting your business. The EPA is still writing and updating its regulations for commercial sterilizers like Midwest. They always have opportunities for the public to comment on draft rules before they're finalized. The regulated businesses like Midwest and their associations always submit statements, but EPA needs to hear from you too about how having an ETO sterilizer as a neighbor affects your business. If having permanent air monitors would help your employees feel safe coming to work, EPA should know that so they can consider requiring that as part of Midwest's cost of doing business, not yours. If your employees have medical complaints that affect their performance, like headaches and coughs, EPA should know that. If you have to lower your prices to rent or sell your land because Midwest is your neighbor, EPA should know that. Part of getting Midwest to change its practices is letting people know what you're experiencing by having them as your neighbor. Thank you all for listening. I hope you found this presentation informative and helpful. I'll pass the floor back to Tricia to announce the next speaker, and I'll stick around for questions later.
Thank you so much, Urszula. And we're going to bring up our final speaker. But I think it's very important that we remember the Willowbrook story. That plant was open for 34 years. And in those 34 years, there were already significant cancer clusters around it. And they emitted a fourth or a third of what Midwest Laredo has been emitting. Midwest Laredo's been open, this will be year 17. And so we're grateful that UISD, Laredo ISD, the city, the county have formally joined the coalition, and we need you as our business leaders to join this coalition and to work with your own network of businesses to become a part of this so we can end this practice and protect our families and our workers and our kids. Our next speaker, she is a business owner and also a member of the Clean Air Laredo Coalition. We'd like to welcome to the floor Alejandra Arguindegui, and she wants to talk about how ethylene oxide affects our community and what we can do collectively about it. Alejandra.
Good evening. I don't know how much more I can say after these presentations that just happened. As a health advocate here in Laredo for 28 years, I brought yoga to Laredo when my son had just turned 1, so that would be 28 years ago, when yoga was only what strange people did. And my greatest joy is to see people come to our facilities. I also am the owner and co-owner with my husband of Orange Theory Fitness. So I have a deep passion and lifelong dedication to helping people achieve their optimal health. And I know how hard that can be, you know, between working long hours and thinking about what to eat and finding time to exercise. And that road to feeling good can be already so challenging. I often look at my app that shows the weather for Laredo. Has anyone ever looked at scrolling a little further down for air quality? So already, Laredo doesn't have great air quality due to other forms of dust and particles. So often we run at about an 86. So this is considered acceptable. But if you have any kind of chronic issues, lung problems, this could already pose a problem. Add on to that the ETO. Wow, and listening to Urszula and listening to Dr. Chamberlain, listening to all of you. To me, this is not something we negotiate on, like how much is okay. A poison's a poison, and a little is already too much. And like Tricia just said, they've already been here 17 years, and they are emitting a fraction of what they were doing in Illinois, and then they resulted in all those cancer clusters. I have 3 children who I would, you know, like every mother, do anything for them. And soon I hope to be a grandmother. And I'm willing to do what it takes. As a business owner, I really call upon all of us to say, a little is already too much, and there is something we can do about it. You know, on another note, I've shared with Sheila and Tricia, recently I lost a very good employee, and her reason for leaving was not because she was going to get another job in Laredo. When she heard about this, she said it was the straw that broke the camel's back. She says, I don't want to be in this community anymore. It just seems like everything takes too long. People don't care. And I said, no, they do. It just, things take time. But I got to thinking that this is one of those things that is quite simple, right? A small company, relatively speaking, with about 50 employees is polluting an entire city, right? We're not talking about, you know, that they employ half our town. 50 employees. And I see Councilwoman Vanessa going, yeah, I mean, it's outrageous. It really is outrageous. So we need to get the fire under our feet, and let's do something about it. Starting with joining the coalition, putting our resources, our time, treasure, and talent behind it, and let's do something about it. Let's not wait any longer. Let's not negotiate our health, our children's health, and the generations to come. For one, I pledge my allegiance to do what I can. You know, and we started doing these outdoor markets every other Saturday, and the coalition's been coming out, and I'm really glad you guys are doing that. And the outdoor markets in the parking lot of Casa Yoga and Orange Theory have been slowly growing, and that came from an idea of, like us right here, community. I thought, a lot of these small businesses, they're young entrepreneurs, and they're trying to get their businesses off the ground. I said, we got a parking lot, it's empty on Saturday. Let's do an outdoor market. And it's been doing great, and so all of these young entrepreneurs, local businesses are popping up. And that's a great place for us to continue to advocate. But how about you guys in your own businesses? What ideas do you have? Like when we did the market, said, let's get the coalition out there. Could you invite the coalition to speak to your employees? Could you inspire them to spread the word? Because all of us as business owners have more resources than we realize. So we gotta inspire people to stand up and care enough for themselves and their future ancestral line. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for giving me this platform to speak. I'm very impressed with the presentations. Thank you to Urszula. That was, I don't know about you guys, but the entire time I was just like, what? But the exciting thing is that we can do something about it. If we had no plan, no other options, well, this would be a really sad meeting. But we can do something about it. And that's the exciting part. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. And to the last part of today's meeting is we really wanted to get your thoughts, get your questions, get your ideas. You as business leaders in Laredo, we would like to make this interactive with you. We think that's very, very important to hear from you. And to help facilitate that will be Melissa Cigarroa, the board president of the Rio Grande International Study Center, and maybe Ricardo can also help in facilitating this kind of discussion and conversation we want to have with everybody today. And I know, Alejandra, you'll be excellent in helping with that effort too. Councilmember Vanessa Perez has one thing she'd like to say so that we can then open the floor to have a very honest kind of conversation with you here tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for being here, and again, we're still gonna get to the questions, but I did wanna make one point about the hope, right? About one of the things that Dr. Chamberlain said was that the state was willing to help us with the cancer data and things like that. Well, I can tell you that since he started working in November, it has been yes, no, different message. I mean, this has not been an easy road. So we have been working. This is not something that we're starting today. This has been going on for months. So the momentum is there. So just, hop on board with us, right? We're continuing on. We need to work with our other elected officials to get this going, but the hope is there and the will is there, and what happened in Willowbrook we can do also in our community as well. So that's all I wanted to reiterate.
Jose Ceballos. I work down the street here off of Mines Road. Been there a few years, and I think it's on. All right, so I was here when you did the town hall last year, and things that come to mind is Councilmember Perez just talked about that it's been a difficult road. It seems that we haven't really had much traction, although I've seen a lot of the effort that you all have displaced, and it's very admirable that you all are doing that. I'm curious to know from Dr. Chamberlain, what is the cost of the equipment? What is each monitor? What does that cost? What was the grant amount that was requested? And also I'd like to know why isn't Midwest meeting with you all? What can be done to get to the table and reach some sort of conclusion that benefits the community and perhaps preserves them in their business to the extent that it can be preserved and that it makes sense for our community? It's more than one question, I realize, but I know some people are thinking about this. And then what happened, I saw in what Ms. Serna put up, there's some decrease that's noted there in the last, between 19 and 20, I think is what I saw, and I wondered what happened that there was that decrease when it was increasing. So those are my questions. Thanks for putting this together. And for those of you that are up front trying to make this community better, I want to personally thank you for your personal commitment and all the time that I know it takes to get in front of this. Thank you so much.
So there's different people here, Jose. Those are all very good questions, and we're going to try our best to answer them. Dr. Chamberlain had to leave to go to another meeting. As far as the amount of the grant, I believe it was $500,000, $500,000. I think we won't find out until September, but we're telling the EPA that's not enough. Like, we need air monitors now. We're not going to wait for a grant. And so we're working also to try to bring down the new administrator, the new jefa of EPA Region 6. And from what we understand, they are going to come to Laredo at the end of June, and we will keep you informed. But it's very important that we apply the pressure and say we're not going to wait around to know if we got a grant or not for air monitors. As far as cost of equipment, Melissa?
Oh, I just wanted to touch again. So Willowbrook, that example, the reason why EPA put up air monitors in Willowbrook is because one of their regional offices was located there. So once they found out that there were ethylene oxide emissions, the office workers there said, we're EPA, we're putting up monitors. Well, EPA workers work for us. Why do we have to buy our own monitoring system if their purpose is to protect public health and investigate public health? So in this meeting in June, we want the community to turn out and tell the administrator that we are just as valuable as Willowbrook, Illinois. And we demand the same courtesy and the same intent to protect our public health.
Urszula, are you able to share a little bit about the costs and the amount of air monitors that y'all got? It was a substantial number, but can you give some context on that?
It was a lot, and I haven't taken the time to tease apart like how many EPA provided and how many our village paid for. And I know a lot of private companies did spot checking in their areas, and they never disclosed the costs or the results of those. But when I was looking through the old village notes, it was in the neighborhood of about $25,000 to do a small study, and they spent about $130,000 to do like a longer term, larger study, and then put together with all the consultants that they needed for determining the placement of everything and analyzing the results and giving, a polished report. I think the mayor said it was about $1 million in total that they spent on everything. You don't necessarily need all the consulting that they did. We had no idea what we were doing or what levels were normal. We had no data when we started, except for like that one day that EPA came in a couple months before they released the public report, just to see if the measured amounts matched their screening tool. But yeah, you're looking at somewhere in the hundreds of thousands to do like a study that will give you enough data to show something.
And also the other thing, Jose, you asked about the decrease in emissions. I don't know if, Angel, you can bring that up from Sheila's PowerPoint to show the chart. Again, this is all self-reported data from the company. As Urszula explained, they use formulas, and they say, we're going to use X amount of ethylene oxide. Based on our scrubber, we believe we're going to emit this amount of ethylene oxide. That's what that data is. It's not verified by monitors. It's based on equations. And so, I don't know if you want to speak a bit more.
I'll try. Okay, so a scrubber, a polisher, these are what they call machines that take ethylene oxide out of the air that they're using to sterilize. So the products in pallets go into a chamber, and then into that pressurized chamber, they put in the ethylene oxide. Once the product has been there for several hours and they believe all of the pathogens that could possibly exist on this product in these pallets are killed, then they will push nitrogen into that chamber and force the ethylene oxide gas into tubes, which then go to these machines, scrubbers, polishers, also something called dry beds that absorb ethylene oxide out of the air. And they need to get it to a small amount, and the last thing they'll do is, or at least a couple of years ago, is that they'll run it through fire and burn off the rest of the existing ethylene oxide. They try to capture as much as they can. Whatever's left over is then admitted to the air. Every scrubber polisher takes a percentage of ethylene oxide. Based on math, they say if we put in 1,000 pounds of ethylene oxide into our facility in this pressurized chamber through many days, and these scrubbers and polishers and dry beds take out X percent, we'll get what we're emitting to the air. It's not a number that's verified. It is a number based on math. So in this last few years, Midwest says that they've installed more technology to take out ethylene oxide of the gas. And that is where they claim these numbers, this reduction. So they got up to a high in 2015 of 17,775 in their production. And since then in the production, they've gone down to 6,314 as of 2020. This year, what they had projected was down to 1,650, which is an amount that is still extremely, exceedingly high. 1,000 pounds, 650 of ethylene oxide emissions throughout the year. And it's the continual exposure that causes the damage or the risk to our health. But it's not verified. And so what we are pledging to do is check with TCEQ, because every time they put in a new machine, a new mitigation device, they have to report that to TCEQ. And so we will be following up to make sure that what they're telling us, their story about how they're reducing emissions, actually matches up to what they're reporting to the state.
That doesn't have future definitions. Yeah. Sheila, I don't know if you wanted to just clarify anything.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to quickly mention that Urszula mentioned that there's different types of air monitors, right? There's continuous air monitors, but there's also canisters. And TCEQ here in Laredo has these canisters. So when they go out and do investigations like that, air monitor investigation or a complaint investigation, they have the equipment, they have the canisters, they have the capability to go out and place a canister, like Urszula said, and take a 24-hour sample or a 5-hour sample or whatever, right? The limit is 24 hours. And they just simply don't do it. Not sure why. They just don't feel the need. So this is something that we can ask TCEQ as well, right? To invest in the proper equipment, like I had mentioned. The Multi-Ray Pro is a mobile monitor that is just used for high concentrations. It'll tell you, like Urszula said, if there's an immediate problem, but it's not going to detect those really low levels of ETO.
Urszula, correct me if I'm wrong or mistaken, but the reason why ETO is very damaging is because ETO was created, and the way it sterilizes it attacks the DNA of the bacteria. Yet it doesn't distinguish between human DNA and bacteria DNA, right?
Yeah, it just attaches, it's a really reactive molecule. So it attaches to whatever it hits the right way. If that happens to be breast tissue, it's breast tissue. If it's DNA, it's DNA. If it's your hemoglobin in your blood that carries oxygen, that's another spot that it hits, and that's actually one of the blood markers that we can follow. But ETO doesn't really care what it hits, it just hits. And it'll react with whatever it can.
And lastly, Jose, you asked about meetings with Midwest. We had a meeting with them in November, and essentially that was just members of RGISC, just a few of us with them. They're people in Jackson, Missouri, and their local PR person here in Laredo. And essentially they kind of said the things Urszula's saying, that there's more ethylene oxide from trees and carne asadas, and they're going to install all this stuff to reduce ethylene oxide, and that they're in compliance with their TCEQ permit. And they kind of stayed there. I know we asked, are you going to do any air monitoring, and would you share that information with the public? And that was definitely a no. And then lastly, Councilmember Vanessa Perez with Senator Judith Zaffirini, we're putting together a meeting in March with leaders from the city, the county, UISD, LISD, and the Clean Air Coalition. And it was going to be about, let's just now get to solutions. Let's just leave the whole PR marketing campaign aside, and let's figure out how we're going to resolve this. And this was coming from our state senator and our city. And basically their answer was twofold. They just said, well, a week's not enough time for us to be there. And then they also said this feels like an ambush. And kind of what they did instead is they just picked a few people to give them a tour of their facility. And that's basically what they preferred to do rather than meet with there was going to be like 2 or 3 leaders from each entity to sit down with them, the superintendents included, but they chose not to do that. And we do keep asking.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Patricia, so much. The rest of the panel, thank you for being here. I've learned quite a bit. It's easier sometimes to get lectured than to read things because we're all very busy. I want to follow up on what Ms. Arguindegui was saying. You know, really what it boils down to is what will be our legacy as a community? What will we say to the rest of our children, grandchildren? What did we do about it when the time was necessary to do something about it? So I echo your sentiments. I feel very strongly that way, in that way. So my question really was, I have 3, but I'm going to try to cut it short. Really, it boils down to me at the school board, how does it affect learning? Is there any studies that would have been done or would even have an impact to make a determination how learning is affected in school-age children? And secondly is how would it affect child growth and development, seeing that we educate the majority of this area's school children. And not only that, as a resident in District 7, UISD District 7, I worry about my future with my granddaughter. Seeing that in looking at the map, it would affect that area as well. So those are the kind of questions that I was bringing in, trying to get an understanding. If there's any studies, should it be something that can be focused in the development of our children, especially school-age children? And at this time, I'll just leave it at that. I'll pose those questions to anybody who'd like to answer them.
Urszula? Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm hoping I caught enough of your question, but the gist of it was that you were looking for effects on children. So as a school board member, I think about kids all the time. Are we doing enough to protect them with the systems that we have in place? Are we giving them enough educational supports to make sure that whatever deficiencies they have are addressed and they catch up to standards and they perform at their best? One of the things that we noticed in children, especially the ones that live the closest to the plant, one of my friends from before times was a lawyer. She had 2 daughters that were very bright and athletic, and they liked to participate. But the effects that they had while the plant was operating was that they had stomach issues. They had trouble concentrating. It would take them longer to do their homework, to understand what they'd read. She's a lawyer, so she reads briefs all the time. And when she was in school at a different part of the state, she could read a brief once and understand it and know how to move forward. At home, a quarter mile from the plant, she had to read the same paragraph 3 or 4 times to understand what it said, because her brain was not functioning the way it was supposed to. So we know that those effects can happen. It depends on how much you're exposed to and for how long, but it's not unreasonable to assume that if they were experiencing those effects and they went away once the plant shut down, that children in Laredo would be experiencing the same thing. Even if it's not at the level that these girls were experiencing, living so close, and being in school on the other side about as far, they were always exposed to about the same amount. You will see some cognitive differences. Like they're not performing to their best, to their potential. And that's something as school leaders that we want to pay attention to and advocate for, because we want our kids performing at their best. What about cancers in kids too.
I think he was asking,
every school has-
studies. He was asking if there are studies that exist right now that shows how ethylene oxide affects child growth and development. If there's just any studies out there that you know of that exist.
Not that I know of. Ethylene oxide is kind of new. We're still fighting over worker studies, which are really controlled environments and they know their exposure. To get to studies on the general population, we kind of have to make guesses and extrapolate from those high worker studies and the effects that we see in them. We only kind of have our anecdotal experiences to rely on.
And I will just add that the EPA, when they increased the risk level in 2016 based on 10 years of reviewing studies and experiments in lab rats as well, that the determination was that ethylene oxide was 30 times more toxic to adults, but they determined it was 60 times more toxic to children. And that comes from the fact of how it acts. And please correct me, Urszula, if I get this wrong. But it's mutagenic, which means it enters the DNA. And because children's bodies are changing all the time, it makes them more susceptible to those changes. And so EPA determined that they had twice as much risk compounded as adults have, 60 times more risk from the previous 2016 assessment.
Yeah, and it's because they're growing and changing, but it's also because they're young. Any changes to their DNA that happens when they're young, those cells are going to multiply more because their bodies are still expanding in size. We as adults, we have a regular turnover, but any changes that happen in one cell, it's going to become changes that expand to 1,000 cells.
Thank you. And we recognize the time. We're already at 8:08, so I think we're going to conclude the evening. Oh, Chief Hurd.
Good evening, Guillermo Hurd, Fire Chief and Emergency Management Coordinator. I did have an answer for the monitors. Dr. Chamberlain did mention that it ranged from 1,000 to 7,000. I know the preliminary order was done by Health Department for 6. And they are trying to work with EPA to get guidance exactly how many is needed for our community. So they don't know. We don't know yet how many we need for a community, but they did do a preliminary order for 6. But they do range from 1 to several thousands of dollars each one.
So if Midwest could, maybe cut their PR firm and their ads, maybe they could buy them.
Chief Hurd, I have a question. So the Midwest, another startling fact is that they use more ethylene oxide for sterilization than any other plant in the country. And for us, that means 1.3 million pounds of this incredibly volatile substance that they use during the year. So did they need to pass some type of hazardous material training? Do they have safeguards in place that they had to clear with your department for what would happen in case of a terrible spill or somehow that ethylene oxide was released into our community?
They submit to the environmental department hazardous materials, but they as a standard for all the other companies, but nothing more than the other companies too.
So they're not required to have any safety plan in case of a terrible accident?
Yes, they are supposed to have a safety plan.
Okay, and that would be filed with the environmental department?
Environmental and also with our department too. So we'll follow up on that question.
We really appreciate it. Thank you.
That's a great back. Also, Urszula has brought up in one of our conversations the last previous, again, because it's such a flammable chemical.
Yes.
And they store so much of it in their facility. So that's something that we would also want to know. Like Melissa said, in case there were an accident, what is the blast radius? Would it explode and how much of the surrounding neighbors, right, that are the -400 kilometers apart, would be affected?
Well, something we'll definitely get some answers, and the more information we'll get exactly how much they're storing or they're telling us they're storing, and we have more
information for the community next time we meet. So I'll make that a priority.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chief. Before we close, Gonzalo Prida, the president of ALFA, the Asociación Logística of Freight Forwarders. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you to all. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Councilmember. So, thank you for the presentation. So, I'm speaking as director of president of Multimodal Logistics. We're one block away from this facility. We're 47 employees. From the 47 employees, we have 2 with cancer right now, really bad cases. They started with lip cancer, the esophagus, the stomach. They are there, you can go and talk to them. It will be very interesting if we can start and see if this has something to do. And the cases are really bad. They went into surgery. One just came back this week. They removed 2 big tumors, one in the stomach, one in the kidney. The children start chemo next week. So the cases are there. I don't know if it's related, but you're more than welcome to see these studies, to see this case, and we're here to help.
Thank you. Can I ask you how long your employees have been there?
Well, one employee has been with the company since 42 years ago. She's one of the really old employees, and the other one, he had to left because of cancer. So he was with us around maybe 15 years. Yes. So, but the company we established in Killam Industrial Boulevard since 1997.
You were there before.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prida. I know, Urszula, you were mentioning we need to tell the EPA these stories. And Mr. Prida, we're hoping we can get this cuestionario with all of these empresas and to try to start collecting this information so that we can present.
The cases.
Sí. Yes, Councilmember Vanessa, I know she's gonna just give a couple of closing thoughts. Thank you to everybody from the Clean Air Laredo Coalition, Rio Grande International Studies Center, all the staff who put this event together and worked really hard. Councilmember Cigarroa, thank you so much for staying here with us the whole time. Trustee Castillo, thank you very much, and to all of you for taking the time. Councilmember Vanessa, I know you want to give some just closing remarks.
Thanks, Tricia. I just, again, want to thank everybody for being here, and just want to reiterate the fact that there's a lot of work getting done behind the scenes. You don't see a lot of the calls and the meetings that we meet every week. It really is a group effort. Tricia really has done an excellent job. So I think we should really give her a round of applause on this. Melissa has always been there as well. Alyssa too, she stays in the background, but she's always helping out. Ricardo too, Business Forum, this was his idea. So round of applause for him too. And Sheila, everybody at risk, all the volunteers for the Clean Air Laredo Coalition, Nina, Joanne and Salo, Ethel, all of you all the dignitaries, everybody who took the time, Chief Hurd, Dr. Chamberlain. We really can't do this without everybody. Commissioner Liendo left early, but she was here the whole time. She's part of the coalition. The county agreed to work with us, the school districts, both UISD and LISD. I mean, I think together we can fix this problem in our community, and we owe it to the next generation. We owe it to the people that are here today, but also to the future. So let's continue to share our stories, spread the word, get people to the coalition. Our only purpose is to help get our air clean. And yes.
Yes.
As one of our initiatives, we're actually going to go talk to the EPA. We've been putting a lot of pressure on the EPA, on TCQ, again, with the help of Senator Zaffarini. I mean, she's not here, but she has been very instrumental in this, and Representative Raymond also, and Congressman Cuellar too, for helping us with the EPA. So
we'll be in DC in late May, a group, a fairly large group. We'll be working with Earth Justice. They are a group of environmental attorneys working on the new rules on EPA, on ethylene oxide that the EPA is doing to go speak there with elected officials and the EPA. And don't forget, late June, we believe the EPA regional administrator is making plans to be here in Laredo, and we need our business leaders there for sure. So
yes.
Thank you so much.
And also to Urszula, she did an excellent job too. So.
And to our traductores, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. All right, have a good evening, and we'll keep working together. Thanks so much.